this is one that's sort of agitating left and right today, it's got to be said, and yesterday. So the former Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has been banned from standing as an MP in his Islington North constituency, which he's represented for the past 40 years, right, since 1983, at the behest of current Labour leader Keir Starmer, who's made all this happen. So, Kevin, take us through all this. There was a lot of machinery within the Labour Party at work here. What exactly happened?
Yeah, right. The end result is Jeremy Corbyn will not be able to stand for Labour at the next general election in Islington North. And if he declares in the meantime that he's going to stand as an independent, he will then be expelled from the party. And the system used by Keir Starmer to implement this, and he's had Corbyn lost the whip in 2020 over, I thought he's awkward, poor, ungenerous, not very good, in truth, response to the Equalities and Human Rights Commission report into anti-Semitism in Labour. Remember, Labour was put into the equivalent of special measures, the only political party that's had that since the BNP. Separate argument whether the Tories should have been in there for Islamophobia, but nevertheless, Labour was put in on anti-Semitism because it hadn't handled complaints properly, for all sorts of reasons, different factions blaming each other. But I think Corbyn's response was very, very poor. Instead of just accepting the report, he was trying to qualify the extent of it in Labour. He's been suspended since then. But what's happened is the National Executive Committee, which is the governing body of the Labour Party, has a Starmer majority, has passed a motion. And it's very rare to do it this way. It's very, very rare, saying doesn't mention anti-Semitism, but it says to avoid any detrimental impact on the party's standing with the electorate and its political interests, Corbyn will not be allowed to stand. What it's really about, I think, three things. One, yes, the question around anti-Semitism. Two, I think Starmer wants to show his break from the Corbyn past by making an example of Corbyn himself. And thirdly, it's intended to silence, gag other left MPs by intimidating them and making them fear that if they speak out on policy or political issues, they too will be barred from standing. So I think it's very draconian. I think it's very authoritarian. I think Islington North should have had the decision themselves. If I lived in Islington North and I was a member of the Labour Party, which I'm not, would I adopt Jeremy Corbyn as my candidate? Might not. He's 73, might want to say, look, it's time to move on. If I lived there, would I vote for him? I might not. If he stands as an independent, could he let another party in? No, because the majority is so big. It's 26,000 of the Labour majority.
Yeah, it's the People's Republic of North London, isn't it? That is.
Yeah, well, look.
They're going to return a Tory.
But both the Tories and the Liberal Democrats could double their vote on last time. The Labour vote under Corbyn could split between Corbyn and an official Labour candidate, and what Corbyn or the official Labour candidate would still be elected. But it's all this question: is it fairness? Is it fair to do it this way, or does it just show the utter ruthlessness of Starmer in his attempt to get Labour elected, make it electable in his view? Jason Beattie, our colleague in the Mirror, has written the two sides of the argument, but he just points out that by alienating the wider left this way, he says this victory for Starmer in banning Corbyn could be tomorrow's defeat, because he will alienate some supporters.
The gamble, I suppose, that Starmer's taking is that because as Mike says here, the anger on the left about excluding Corbyn is understandable, but anyone watching PMQ sees the Tories constantly tying Starmer to the Corbyn leadership that, of course, he served under. They see that association as toxic to Starmer. Of course, Johnson won that landslide in 2019, basically, but a lot of it playing on the fear of Corbyn and what Corbyn was going to do. Yeah. And what it would mean for safety and security and international diplomacy and other things. And we now know, for example, with the war in Ukraine, I mean, Corbyn probably wouldn't have been, there's no way he'd have been as determined as Johnson was to arm the Ukrainians against Russia. So it would have made a huge impact. And is this not, from Starmer's point of view, the gamble that he can lose the extreme left on his party, be seen to almost detoxify it after some of the scandals of the Corbyn years, and actually not move the party to the right, but just appease that part of Britain which had a problem with Corbyn, the Daily Mail readers, that particular attack from the Tories. He can nullify that by saying, "I've kicked him out."
Yeah, he is moving Labour to the right, but it will still be the centre left. It'll just be nearer the centre than the left, and he's making all those pragmatic, practical calculations. He will also argue he's acting on the principle of anti-Semitism just cannot be tolerated in any way, and he's put all that around Corbyn, because there was unquestionably a problem in Labour at the time, and some of the people who were attracted to Corbyn were anti-Semitic, and the complaints weren't dealt with fully. Sometimes nothing to do with Jeremy Corbyn and his office, as the Martin Ford QC now report showed. The head office, which was opposed to Corbyn, was occasionally mishandling complaints and suspicion that was political. But there was certainly a problem, and for a party like Labour that preaches anti-racism and equality and fairness, for a community in Britain, the Jewish community, to feel you are so much against him and anti-Semitic is a point. And in some ways, Corbyn had a blind spot, because he would always say, "Well, I spent my entire life campaigning against racism," so he couldn't understand why some of the things he said and did were alienating the community that was saying, "Look, that is anti-Semitic."
Yeah, and then there's the argument that he spent his entire life doing these things. Alex Cohen says Corbyn's like Orban in Hungary, maybe, but the idea that he spent his entire life fighting for something and hasn't got it does make you wonder whether really he's that effective as an MP.
Well, I thought he was an ineffective leader. I thought he was a poor leader in many ways. Although it's got to be said, Labour's had a deeper problem than Jeremy Corbyn, because even in the drubbing of 2019, Labour's share of the vote in that general election was higher than Ed Miliband got in 2015 and Gordon Brown in 2010. In some ways, Starmer now getting Labour in the lead with double-digit poll leads is a phenomenal turnaround, unquestionably. There are lots of reasons for that, and assisted in some ways by Boris Johnson, who wooed the country in 2019 and then became an utter liability for the Tories after Partygate, then Liz Truss.
Well, Boris Johnson's quite good at wooing. He's not so good at actually sticking around after the wooing has been completed.
But Starmer and his supporters can, I think, legitimately argue they've gone from Labour winning its fewest number of seats since 1935 to rattling the gates of Downing Street and knocking on the door of number 10 at the next election. That's a remarkable transformation.
Yeah, and as Lazy pointed out there, you've got similar divisions in the Conservative Party. They've had a remarkable transformation in terms of, having a landslide only, just over 3 years ago, and completely spaffing the whole thing up the wall in a very short space of time. I don't think Facebook will notice that was a swear, so let's not mention it.
Well, it was a Boris Johnson quote in another context.
Exactly. One quick thing before we move on to good news. If Jeremy Corbyn might stand as an independent, I suppose maybe he can't be selected by a rebel Labour Party, constituency Labour Party anywhere else. That's not going to be on the books. But if he were to stand against the approved Labour candidate in Islington North, there was a general election, there would be a huge amount of national attention on it. There would be a huge number of momentum activists who generally there's not enough. There's a lot of them on Twitter, but there isn't enough of them in any one constituency to actually swing a cat. Whereas if they all just, descend on Islington North and try to get their man back in, they would plough all what little resources they have now into that. Labour would throw a lot of its perhaps effort into trying to get their person in, as opposed to Jeremy. It would become quite a battleground, wouldn't it? And become quite obvious. Is there any chance that Corbyn could actually take that, could win? Or is he always, he's just going to split the vote and he's going to lose?
No, I think there's a reasonable, good chance for Jeremy Corbyn of winning. Islington North is the most compact, dense constituency in the UK. He's been there for 40 years. He will have helped many of the people living in it. He will know them. He's got huge name recognition. And as you say, there will be loads of every trot in the country will go to campaign for him. There'll be lots of door knocking, leafleting, street corner rallies. Labour, to counter that, would need a candidate. I would, just chatting to people in Labour, they think they need a vibrant young local woman of colour who can present as the future, not the past. If they don't smile at this, Foxy. But if she was called Aardvark or Boardwalk, she'd appear ahead of him. Corbyn on the ballot paper when people are looking for the name and the logo, and it would be whether this Islington North circus somehow pulls Labour down and the Tories can say this is the real face of Labour, or Starmer can say, look at my Labour Party and look at that one. That's how I've changed. It's what is it a symbol of?
But a fresh face against the old guard is probably quite an appealing sell for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Never mind, just for the election generally. If Starmer can't say New Labour, can he? But he needs to have some kind of hopey, changey Barack Obama type rhetoric to say, you've had 13 years of the Tories, whatever's going to be then 15 years. Let's move on. Let's do something different. Let's change. And that might be very indicative of that. But we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Thank you for explaining that to us, Kevin.